Good afternoon, everybody. Today, what I'm going to do is to talk about Rajinder Singh Bedi, one of the most important, prominent, and front-ranking writers of Urdu literature. When I talk about this, incidentally, today being the 1st September, which is also the birth anniversary of Rajinder Singh Bedi, so that's also a kind of a tribute. And my homage to the great writer who left in 1984 on this very day, which is the 1st September. Now, the important question today that why I have chosen this writer Rajinder Singh Bedi, and if at all I have chosen Rajinder Singh Bedi to talk on him or about his art or about his craft or about his contributions to Urdu literature, with reference to the progressive movement of which he was a part of. I think this is very important today because we do not have writers like Rajinder Singh Bedi any longer in the domain of Urdu fiction. So that's one important part of it. And the second one, that it's the timeless power of art. And again, it is the timeless power of Rajinder Singh Bedi's art, which makes him relevant to all times, makes him relevant to all conditions, and makes him relevant to the passages of time. So it's not that we have a dwindling concern for somebody like Rajinder Singh Bedi, or we don't acknowledge today the greatness of the writer. Anyway, so his birth anniversary, which is the very important day in the history of Urdu fiction, because this very day Rajinder Singh Bedi was born, and from there he never looked back. Yes, he has had his conditions where he has had his turbulences also during the course of his life, which every artist does have in his life, so that's not a very big thing. Anyway, so the stories which I have selected today to talk about, the two stories which I have selected, which I have picked up, they are, one is Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and the second is Lajwanti, very well known stories of Rajinder Singh Bedi, and Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and the second one is Lajwanti. So when we talk about this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, it is generally that this is a story which I think epitomizes, which represents the highest pedestal in the artistic journey of Rajinder Singh Bedi, and some of the stories, like other stories like Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, then Garam Coat, and then we have this Sirf Cigarette or Lajwanti, and many others which are there. So, but then specifically I will be focusing on the two important stories which I have selected for discussion today, and they are of course, one is Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and the second one is Lajwanti. When we talk about this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, I think what is important to note is that Rajinder Singh Bedi is a very different writer from his contemporaries. He is very different from Sadhu and Mantu. He is very different from Krishan Chandra. He is very different from his other contemporaries, because Mantu was more obsessed with the idea of partition and sex. Krishan Chandra was also very different in the sense that he was a prisoner of his own commitment to socialist realism. These are all parts of the progressive movements. So what Rajinder Singh Bedi did is to write on the travails of life, is to write on the trivialities of life, is to write on the minor issues of life, the day-to-day issues which are very important in the context of every family, in the context of every human society, regardless of geography. So this is where Rajinder Singh possibly has an edge in terms of the selection of ideas, or in terms of the selection of themes and issues that he generally writes in stories. For example, his first collection, Danudam, that was, and then followed by Garhan, and then some other collections are there, Danudam, Garhan, Garam Coat, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and of course very popular for his novella, Ek Chadar Mehli Si. So I think this is what makes the literary immortality of Rajinder Singh Bedi largely accrues from the fact that he is one writer who is very different in the sense that he has his own context, a social context. He is not a writer who writes on the horrors of partition, on the horrors of Holocaust. He is not much concerned about projecting what happened to the subconscious continent in the wake of this rather cataclysmic event or a catastrophic event like partition. So he immediately leaves Lahore, where he was born in Sialkot, and then on partition he comes back to India. And after that, he has a long journey, a long artistic journey. And remember, Rajinder Singh Bedi is really on a high pedestal of art. On a very high pedestal of art. His craft is certainly something which is very distinguished in terms of his. He was a wily craftsman and his ideological stance. He doesn't have a dogma to pursue as a writer. That is particularly very important about Rajinder Singh Bedi. That he doesn't have a dogma to pursue in the sense that Krishan Chandra was committed to. So that progressive, though he was a constituent, though he was a component of the progressive writers movement very much, but he did not have a doctrinal adhesion. That doctrinal adhesion of this Krishan Chandra suffered too much from this doctrinal adhesion, but Rajinder Singh Bedi was slightly different in the sense that he aligned himself with the progressive writers movement, but he did not carry the dogma. He did not carry the maxim. He did not carry that commitment as if he will not go beyond the boundary of a progressive concern. So Rajinder Singh Bedi was a very free artist. He was an artist who looked into life, into the dynamics of existence, and now of course his characters are generally drawn from the lower strata of the society, from the lower middle classes, their day-to-day travails, their trials, their tribulations, and their sufferings, their agonies, their ecstasies, their euphorias, everything you find in what you call Rajinder Singh. And this is how Rajinder Singh Bedi becomes a very complete kind of an artist. Why complete artist? Because he has a wide range of human sympathy. That is one element that separates him from the rest of the writers of his time, or even beyond, is that he in his stories never lost sight of the fact that he was writing on human conditions of the time. He was writing on human conditions of the time, and in the process of writing on the human conditions, he sounds very realistic. So that element of realism also comes into Urdu fiction with the rise of Rajinder Singh Bedi as a short story writer. Yes, Premchand did. There was that element of realism, but then the undercurrents of realism are very different from Premchand also, because Premchand was more confined to the representation of what you call the life of the villagers, the peasants and the feudal lords and all that. But then here, the context of Rajinder Singh Bedi is very different even from Premchand. So in a way, we have a writer who brings into play, who brings into the ambit of his concern, the daily drama of existence. The daily drama of existence. And thank you very much everybody who is joining, Professor Safdar Imam Qadri, Professor Lalan Prashad Singh. I'm really thankful to you for being there, and some very big people are there online. So now the stories that I have chosen, as I told you, that the two stories that I would eventually be talking about, and they are Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo and Lajwanti. Remember, when I talk of Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, I think this is something where Rajinder Singh is at his very best. In terms of craftsmanship, in terms of expressing that human sympathy, and in terms of bringing into it a character who somewhat alters the course of the life of the very family she goes into. So let me start with this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo. There are two very important characters in the play, in the story. One is Madan and the other one is Indu. Remember, Indu becomes a metaphor here. Indu assumes the position of a woman who comes into the life of Madan. And remember, the very important thing is that on the very first night, which is the wedding night of the two, Madan and Indu, they are lying in bed. And there, Madan asks a question to Madhu, and the question is, what can you give? It is from Indu, who is his wife. And of course, that's the first night, and they are very shy, they are very hesitant, they are very demure, they aren't opening up as much as they generally do. So, and against this backdrop, there is one sentence which comes out. one sentence which is spoken, one sentence which is delivered by Indu, and that is the crux itself. That is the essence of the story. And then the whole story is based on that very commitment that she expresses on the day one of her married life, on the day one of her wedding life, and that is Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo. This is a statement issued by Indu on the very first night. Remember, this is very important because we will keep coming back to this idea of what a woman really can do when she decides something. When she decides something, so that is very important. That's very important. That's a very huge statement, and that speaks volumes about the kind of woman she is eventually going to be for the family. So Madan though is brute. Madan is somebody who is not very intelligent. He is a timid character, of course very much a constituent of the patriarchal obsessions. So what he says, he doesn't get much of it. He doesn't get a hang of what finally it is going to mean at the end of the day when you look back and say, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo. That means it's like owning the troubles, that whatever the troubles that you have in your life will be now mine. So that's a commitment expressed from the day one of the night, and then the story really moves, the narrative goes further. And from there, Indu resolves to not only own the troubles of the family, what Indu does is to portray herself in a light which is so very different. Dr. Ali Imam Khan is also online. Thank you very much, sir, for being there. Remember, their Indu is a commitment. Indu herself is the commitment. She personifies that element of commitment, that degree of commitment which has trying to uphold there in the very first night. So what happens next? It's not in a statement issued only for the heck of it. Remember this. This is not in a statement issued only for the heck of it. This is a statement to live with for the rest of her life. So that moment of commitment is translated into action in the most part of her life, for which she of course suffers. She does suffer a lot. She is through situations which are disconcerting. She is through conditions which are really very hostile at times. And this is what happens then. She is brought into the family of Dhani Ram. Dhani Ram who is the father-in-law, who is Indu's father-in-law. Then there are little kids because he was a widower. Dhani Ram is a widower who lost his wife long back, and he has some small kids like Dulari, like Munni, like Pachi. So this what the family is. It is almost a broken family without a woman, and you can imagine a family which goes without a woman. So Indu is the first woman. Indu is the woman who comes into the life of both Madan and Dhani Ram. Madan, who is the son of Dhani Ram, and Indu is obviously the daughter-in-law. So she gets the whole hang of the troubles early on. So see, on the day one, she's making a commitment, and for the rest of her life, she has to live with this commitment, which is going to be a huge challenge. But but how she reacts eventually, how things really go for her, and that commitment is how this commitment is honored in every action of hers in the later part of her life. That is something very important here. So there might be a question here that I will come later with regard to the portrayal of this Indu as a woman character, or somebody who was so possessed by the element of the human kindness. So that will be that's something which is very questionable, and that will come into play later on. So what happens that now all these little kids, the children which are there, who are the children of Dhani Ram, become very emotionally attached to her. Gradually, they see her as a surrogate mother. So this idea of Indu projecting herself into the family as a surrogate mother who takes on the onus of Shakil Sasrami. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, sir. I am really thankful to you for having joined this. So what happens that now these kids become very attached to her gradually, as if they have all of a sudden they have found a new mother, as if there is a discovery of the lost mother, because they knew nothing about the mother. They lost a mother when they were very small, and they were small kids, and they don't even have a faint memory or a vivid or very murky recollection of what their mother was. So bring them on camera. Dr. Anil Prasad, thank you very much for joining us. Yes, so that's very important here. So Indu gets into the family, and from the day one of the she defines her role. She defines her role. She gets involved in the act of construction for the family, which was apparently disarray for not having a woman. For a family which was going without a woman. So what happens that Hindu now gradually gets into the fold, and then one by one, every passing day for her is the extension of her commitment. Every passing day for her is the extension of her commitment. Every passing day is the expression of her commitment, which becomes stronger. Not that she is tired, not that she is jaded, not that she is fatigued, not that she surrenders and she raises her hands, enough is enough, and I am not going to do this and that. And the whole family keeps revolving around that central character of Hindu. So Hindu becomes a symbol of love. Hindu becomes a symbol of humanism. Hindu becomes a symbol of integrity. Hindu becomes a symbol of affection. So the kids are so attached to her, and to the extent that it begins to irk Madan. Madan, obviously they were young, it was just the marriage concluded, and Madan has his own pressures of being a man. Has his own desires also. He has his own. Obviously, there is that question of sex also which comes into play, and he doesn't get much of it. Given that split self, Hindu has a split self. One is that she is very drawn towards the kids, and in the process of being drawn towards them, what she unconsciously ignores are the demands of Madan as a husband. So here she is not fulfilling her commitment as a wife. So she is torn apart between the domestic responsibilities and the demands of her husband, who somewhat progressively gets very disillusioned. And why she is so disillusioned? Because he thinks that Hindu is not doing justice to him. See here is the woman. Remember that the kind of responses that we have from Hindu. She is managing the whole thing. She is managing the whole family. She is owning the troubles of the family. All those turbulences, all those turmoils which were there in the family are completely owned by her, and she is committed to it. So her commitment is not questioned by Madan. But what he finds it as something very difficult is to cope up with a kind of that he finds his wife being indifferent to his responses, to his carnal issues, which are also not very satisfied. So this is what an Hindu is torn asunder completely. Sometimes he runs to the husband, sometimes he runs back to the kids of the family. And then Dhani Ram is a very happy man because he has a daughter-in-law who is doing all this for the family. So this is the very act of reconstruction of the family in this disarray gets going. And Vakil Ahmad, thank you very much for joining me. Sir, I'm really thankful to you. And remember, this is what happens in the family. Gradually, Hindu becomes a kind of a metaphor. She is assimilated into the family fold, and everybody is hovering around her, everybody is going around her. That means she is the central force of the family now. So the focus shifts from Dhani Ram, from Madan to Hindu. For Hindus, that life, that profound commitment of Hindu, that scorching commitment of Hindu gets reflected in every action of hers. So see, remember, there are times when there are problems, and Hindu is always to the fore. She has a ready solution to everything. What happens next? That Dhani Ram is transferred to Saharanpur. He was a clerk in a postal office. So he's transferred to Saharanpur. Dhani Ram, the father of Madan, and the father-in-law of Hindu. So when he's transferred to Saharanpur, obviously the whole family join him there at Saharanpur. Madan stays back, and the whole family shifts. Hindu goes there along with the kids and all that. Kids are very happy because they have now almost a surrogate mother in Hindu. So Hindu here epitomizes that milk of human kindness, which is particularly very important in the context of a woman who comes from outside, gets into the family, owns the troubles of the family to the extent that she completely loses herself. She doesn't bother how she looks here. There are no cosmetics applied on her face. Mother wanted her to look beautiful. Mother wanted her to look like a woman, a newlywed woman that she was. But then obviously the pressures of the commitment and the pressures of the responsibilities that she has shouldered or she has put upon herself somehow leaves Madan disillusioned to the extent that he gradually begins to suffer from a kind of a syndrome, a withdrawal syndrome. Then the family shift to Saharanpur, where his father is transferred. So what happens that they are there, Madan stays back, he's all alone here, and then there are letters written to Dhani Ram, his father. There are telegrams sent to her that send Hindu back, send Hindu back. There's too much oppression. All these kids are very, very happily living at Saharanpur with their father and Hindu, and even that Dhani Ram is also very happy to have such a daughter-in-law. So this is the traditional family where the emergence of a daughter-in-law to the forefront of things means so much to the family that was completely in shreds. That was into shreds. So when you look at the bits and bytes of what Hindu does, to the family, you will find that this is the emergence of a woman who is a goddess. This is the emergence of a woman for the family as a goddess, almost a very saintly character. She doesn't represent any feminine features. She doesn't represent anything what a woman is known for. Obviously, a woman is known for construction, a woman is known for destruction also. So she will be all constructive only. She will be all constructive, and she will mean her commitment to the extent that will leave eventually her husband Madan very disillusioned, and she doesn't bother for it much. But then, of course, these telegrams are sent to Dhani Ram. Dhani Ram also ignores it, but then finally what he decides to send Hindu back to him. Hindu is back. What happens? Then Hindu is back to Madan, and Madan is not a very happy man. By that time, Madan had almost lost his ways. He was going to women, he was going to different women, he was going to brothel, he was going to prostitution. So there was a changed man. He wasn't the man because he suffered sexually. Because this is something which Rajinder Singh Bedi here keeps it very undercover. She is not very blatant about it. He is not very He's not saying it very ostensibly. But then, of course, there is an undercurrent of sexual disillusionment on the part of Madan, who grieves, who thinks that justice is not being done to him, and his wife is more inclined towards the family, towards the domestic issues, towards the issues of her brothers and sisters. So that's what the problem here is. Madan obviously is not exalting himself. There is no exaltation involved in the character of Madan. Madan remains a very typically a patriarchal character who doesn't look beyond carnal satisfaction, who doesn't look beyond carnal lust. So obviously that he is on that front he does suffer a lot, and this is something where which Hindu does not realize. So what happens that eventually as they grow up, they are married, everything is settled down, even there is the division also of the family finally, and this and whenever, remember, this is very important to know, that whenever the family is in trouble, Dhani Ram also now loses his health, and then he takes leave, comes back, and then in a matter of about very shortly he suffers an attack and he dies. So he dies because, and then there is a guilt complex. For a moment, there seems to be a kind of a guilt complex on the part of Madan, who believes that maybe it was his summon, or maybe it was his obduracy to call them back, affected the health of Dhani Ram, and there is that guilt, though it's not very strong, but then somehow there is an undercurrent, there is that undercutting of our realization on the part of Madan, who thinks that he hasn't done justice to his father. But then, of course, things go very differently, and finally, remember, in every moment of trouble, in every moment of financial crisis, when Madan is very concerned about marriage of Munni, when he is very concerned about other issues, the money is always is offered by Hindu, who says, okay, don't worry, I have things to sort out and I will sort them out. And she does sort things out, using her own wisdom, using her own managerial ability. And remember, she is always there in moments of trouble. So she bails the family out from whatever the trouble it has. So what happens that now there is also a division in the family. People grow up, people are married, they disappear with their houses and all that. And finally what happens that Hindu also has kids. The delivery of the kids he has one, he has two, he has three, one after the other. She gets a number of children, and remember, Madan. Here there is one moment of humanity also. It does come to the fore on the part of Madan when she is delivering, when Indu is delivering her first child. So when Indu is delivering her first child, obviously there is tension in the family. There is too much of pressure on Madan. And when Indu says that I had a dream that I will lose my life. Lose my life when I deliver the first child. So that was a kind of a trauma, a psychological trauma that she had lived up with. So the problem there is that Indu had this at the back of her mind, that the first child will be the cause of her death, which does not happen finally, because she survives the troubles, but then she survives and all that. And then there are a number of kids involved, number of kids who keep coming, 1, 2, 3, and she becomes a kind of a woman who has children, generally that the way a woman has. So what happens? That family grows, and then this Madan's business also flourishes simultaneously. But by that time, when Indu realizes, remember what is important here, by the time Indu realizes that Madan is no longer the man that he used to be. He helped him in moments of financial trouble. He helped him in moments of emotional stress and distress. But then she realizes that she is not the man that he was. That is when she gets to know that, well, he is going to different women also. He is not very keen to come back to her. Indu is in that process. Remember what Indu is a symbol of sacrifice here. Indu epitomizes what sacrifice means. Indu epitomizes everything that a woman can build. She builds, she rebuilds, and she reconstructs the family into distress. So that is one thing which is very important to note. That maybe we question here the character of Indu as somebody who has been Sayyid Hyder Raza. Thank you very much, sir. And then Shoaib Naqvi Sahab, I also welcome you. Thank you very much for joining me. And Sayyid Hyder Raza, thank you very much. Wakil Ahmad sir. So see, what I am trying to say is this, that here Rajinder Singh Bedi, what he does, we can have some questions about it. Because the important question is that, can a woman really ignore her husband's patriarchal longings, clamorings, his sexual desires, his carnal longings, his carnal clamorings, to the extent, and more so when she is very preoccupied with the domestic issues of the family. So Indu becomes inconsistent in the sense that she is more drawn towards resolving the issues of the family than to look into the physical problems of her husband. So that's what the issue is here. And this is how Madan also gets very disillusioned, is very dissatisfied, because sexually he made a lot of sexual compromises. And this is something which a man cannot do. This is something which you cannot ignore. And by the time Indu realizes, what happens once that Indu is she is hugely painted and perfumed, she has cosmetics on her face and all that, and then when Madan looks at her, he is very surprised to see that part of Indu which she never did in her lifetime. So what is this? All of a sudden she realizes that, well, Madan has lost his baby because of her own indifference towards his physical passions, towards not that he was not taken care of. Food is just one part of it. The second, that when a man wants a woman, he wants her completely, not into parts, not into installments, not into a small segments of existence. No, it's not that. They want things. A man wants a woman in totality, which Indu possibly did not do, given her inclination towards rebuilding the family that was in chaos, that was into the grip of turbulence. So here Indu becomes somewhat an inconsistent character. And remember what happens, that finally he discovers that, well, she possibly is the guilty party for being too drawn towards the issues and for being too committed to the problem. And she says it, that, well, I didn't do nothing for myself. All I did was the family. All I did was the care for your brothers and sisters. All I did was the reconstruction of the family I was a part of. I did nothing for myself. So I did nothing for myself. That means she was committed to a cause. And the cause was a larger one. The cause was a huge one, which Madan does not realize. He cannot look beyond his carnal issues. That is the limitation of Madan. Here, Madan is a very conservative character in the sense that he was a prisoner of his own lust. He was a prisoner of his own lust. He could not see the wider aspect of Hindu's character, that how fiercely committed she was, that how a woman who comes and gets involved from the day one of your life. And remember, she also grumbles a day when there is a dialogue between the two, and when she says that, do you remember what I had said to you on the wedding night? She reminds mother that what I had said to you, that yes, and then mother says that you had said that Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, that is to say that surrender all your troubles to me. And then remember, this is a very important part. There is a dialogue between the two, and here Rajinder Singh Bedi really is at his best when he reminds, when he makes Hindu say that you could have also said that Apne Sukh Mujhe Dedo, let all my pleasures be yours. So perhaps that's a single isolated solitary moment of complaint coming from Hindu in her entire conjugal existence. In her entire conjugal existence. So that's one moment of complaint to which Madan is clueless. He has had no idea. He could have said that yes, I did not say that, but well, this is what it is. So finally what happens, that Hindu remains Hindu is the character who is somewhat not very happy with herself for all that she did. She does some introspection. And remember, here when we say Apne Dukh in the story, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, yes, mother had given her troubles, all troubles of his life to Hindu. Hindu managed them perfectly. There are no questions about that. But in that process, there were certain compromises. In that process, there were certain issues that were also dismissed into nothingness, which ought to have higher degree of attention than actually they were given by Hindu. So here, Hindu, though on the one side she emerges as a character who is very committed to the family, as somebody who not only shared, who burdened the issue, who took the whole burden of the family and did some great works for the family in question. But at the same time, being a woman and being a wife, I think that part is something which is lopsided. That part is something which is inconsistent. And here, Hindu does not become a complete woman. So what Rajinder Singh Bedi does here, that he does cast a character who almost becomes a kind of a redeeming soul for the family. She is the redeeming soul for the family. But in that process, Hindu also is guilty of ignoring Imran Saghir. Thank you very much for joining me. And this is what the story is. So remember, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo is a very coruscating narrative of a woman's commitment. And remember, see, Rajinder Singh Bedi also informs you that when a woman decides for construction, this is what she can do. This is what she can do as a woman who has this enormous ability of rebuilding from the ruins, of reconstructing everything that was into disarray, of reconstructing whatever was not in order. So not only she brings a sense of discipline into the family, not only she brings a sense of order into the family in disarray, but at the same time she takes on the whole responsibility. So obviously that is one part of it. But the second thing is that there is a touch of idealism about Hindu. And you have critics like Professor Gopichan Narang, then Bakar Mehdi, and Wahab Ashrafi, Mumtaz Shiri. These all critics agree with this part that Bedi is second to Bantu. Bedi is second to Mantu in terms of art. I think that statement is also not very agreeable, that Bedi can be second to Mantu, and after Mantu this is Rajinder Singh Bedi who is the best one. So that's a questionable thing, that's a debatable issue. But then the story Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo is written by somebody who was on a high pedestal of art. He was a wild craftsman. And remember, but then this Hindu, there is a touch of idealism about Hindu. So that's what is the only irksome element. That's the only element which is disconcerting for the readers, that can you have a woman so committed to the reconstruction process, so committed to a family, she will ignore everything, she will ignore her look, she will ignore her personality, she will ignore her husband, and she will dedicate herself to the cause of the family so entirely and so completely that nothing matters for her at the end of the day. So I think that is a kind of a glorification, and in that act of, or in that process of glorification, we have certain degree of idealism also creeping into the character of Hindu. But then at the end of the day, finally it must be said that Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo is one of the best stories that Rajinder Singh has written, and perhaps his literary immortality has much to do with this story, Apne Dukh Mujhe. There are some very moving, touching paragraphs in the story, and you can realize that if a woman like Hindu becomes a part of a family, then the troubles of the family are really over. This is what the message of the story, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, is. And remember, yes, as for the questions we can have, we can question the commitment of Hindu, and today we do not find the characters like Hindu very much in every family, and today a woman's temper is very different from what the temper of Hindu was. And Hindu is a reality in today's time. In postmodern conditions, perhaps you can have a woman who will come, and they will come, and if a woman comes, she only comes to devastate the family rather than to rebuild, rather than to reunify, rather than to reconstruct. So this is what the perception here given in the story, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo. And this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo possibly has a touch of class also. Has a touch of class, a touch of distinct class that separates it from the rest of the stories of Rajinder Singh Bedi. Obviously you have Garam Coat, obviously you have Sirf Ek Cigarette, you have Rahman Ke Jute and all that, and they are very wonderful stories, no questions about them. But then Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo has a larger universal appeal. Has a larger universal appeal, and the universality of the problem, because every family looks for a woman like Hindu. And remember, that's a mythical name also. In Hindi mythology, Hindu is a very important name. And so is Madan. Madan also has a mythological connotation about it. So remember what happens, that here Madan and Hindu are the two characters which are very poles apart. Because Madan isn't a very responsible character, but Hindu indeed is, and in that process of commitment, Hindu forgets the whole existence. She forgets everything about her own being. So that is one absolute moment of commitment, lived and translated into action veritably every day. So this is what the story is as far as this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and here Rajinder Singh Bedi really does his very best. Remember, when we read Rajinder Singh Bedi, we find that Rajinder Singh Bedi is on a higher level of imagination. He hasn't lost his connect with the society of the time. So he is not writing the big issues of life. He is not writing the existential issues of life. He is not writing the horrors of the Holocaust or the terrors of what partition really. And one of the criticisms that generally Rajinder Singh Bedi has against him is that he did not write much on partition. Yes, he did not write much on partition, but what he wrote sufficed to propel him to a position that a very few writers can afford. And Mumtaz Shiri having gone to the extent of saying that, a literary critic, Mumtaz Shiri, having gone to the extent of saying that Rajinder Singh Bedi is what Chekhov was to European fiction. What Chekhov was to European fiction, Rajinder Singh Bedi is to Urdu fiction. I think there is not much to debate it, there is not much to doubt it. And obviously Rajinder Singh Bedi was in a higher plane of existence, artistically also. So that's where the story really ends. Then we have the second story that I have chosen. Obviously, these are two very great stories of Rajinder Singh Bedi. One is obviously that what we discussed, we did go into, and the other is Lajwanti, a very popular, very widely known, highly acclaimed, much revered. Almost there is a kind of a deification about this story, Lajwanti. Lajwanti, perhaps is one of the best stories. But then, given as far as my own literary judgment is concerned, my judgment on Bedi's stories, then obviously I will put this this Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo on a higher plane than this Lajwanti, because Lajwanti obviously will come second to it, because that craftsmanship which Rajendra Singh Bedi exhibited in the construction of this story, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, is absolutely non-parallel. This is incomparable. This is the best of. But personally, that's what my own critical judgment would suggest, that Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo has the best of everything in it. It's a narrative, it's a story, it's thematically it is very strong, ideologically it's very powerful, and here Rajendra Singh brings home or presses the message home that a woman can really construct things anew. So that's what it was. Anyway, when we come to Lajwanti, we know that this is one of the stories, and possibly Lajwanti is a response to the criticism when Rajendra Singh Bedi faced this criticism that he doesn't write much on partition. Remember, this is stories in the context of the partition. What happened during partition is that very briefly I will sum up the story, the theme of the story, and then I will come to the other part of it. That there is a. That's the response, Rajendra Singh Bedi's response to the criticism that he did not write much on partition, or the terrors of partition, or on the horrors of partition, or the bestial acts of partition, whatever it might be. But then here Lajwanti is in the context of partition, because what happened that in the communal violence, in the wake of the communal violence of this vivisection or of this partition of the country, some women were abducted from both sides of the fences, from both the countries, from India and from Pakistan also. There were women abducted. So abduction of the women was on both the sides. Some women were abducted from here, some women were abducted from there, and that is something which is a very important part of the story. So what happens that Sundar Lal, who is the husband of Lajwanti, obviously Sundar Lal is no saint. Sundar Lal is not a very idealist husband. He is a very ordinary kind of a husband, and a husband within the framework of patriarchy, a very much patriarchal character, out and out a patriarchal character, who Lajwanti was his wife. And what happened that even when prior to the abduction, Sundar Lal was never very nice to him. He wasn't very nice to him. He wasn't decent to him. He oppressed her. He did whatever he wanted to do, which generally the middle class lower husband does to a wife as part of his life, right? But then what happens that she is abducted, and then after that there is a political decision. There comes about a political decision that all those abducted women will be brought back to will be rehabilitated. So that's the plan. There is Ghar Basao, Dil Basao. These are the two dictums which are issued here. That Ghar Bachao and Dil Basao. That is to say that those women who are abducted are to be brought back to the point of to their origins, and there has to be that re-acceptability of the women who have been abducted. So what happens that there is the now committee formed, of which Sundar Lal goes on to become the secretary, Ghar Basao, Dil Basao, and they start this morning walk, what called Pheri, that's the morning walk, and they keep shouting that whosoever is there, some women are brought, and remember this story tells you that patriarchy has its own obsessions, patriarchy has its own compulsions, and this story is written in the backdrop of a patriarchy which is very unrelenting, in the sense that it doesn't make too many compromises. It has a mindset which does not change. Patriarchal mindset which does not change. So what happens that this abduction process was there, and then of course the recovery of the women who were abducted is on, and you have certain character like Sundar Lal is one who is leading this campaign. There are other volunteers involved, and they move from place to place, and they shouted. They keep shouting that if we could find any women who were abducted and all that, and the whole process goes on. There are many women who are recovered. There are many women who are rejected also. They are not taken back. They say, remember here that question I will come. Let me complete this part. What happens to Lajwanti and how she is brought back home? That how patriarchy reacts to the issues. Remember, patriarchy is something which is very unrelenting. It has its own pressures, and it does not it does not compromise with that, with those pressures. So what is that? That patriarchal mindset and that male chauvinism is always there. And Rajendra Singh Bedi also brings into focus that element of chauvinism also. When women are rejected, remember that there is a lot of women which is brought before them, and there are many people say, what we are going to do with old women now? They are discarded people. They are dishonored people. So this dishonor, because of the abduction and the refusal to take them back as a kind of a disgrace for the family to which she goes, is either feudal mindset, either it is a patriarchal neurosis. I will go to the extent of calling it a patriarchal neurosis. And remember, this neurosis gets manifested into the acts of refusal when people say that no, she is already disgraced, I am not going to get back the women, let them be there wherever they are, because they are stigmatized. So this element of stigma about that abduction and the reacceptability of the abducted women does become a problem in the context of their rehabilitation. So, but in Sundar Lal is very different. He is desperate to find Lajwanti. He is making all efforts. He is going all out. He is going berserk. He is desperate to recover his wife Lajwanti, and then he realizes that he was not fair to her. He was not fair to her, and not only that, he was not fair to her, he was guilty of oppressing her too. All these images keep flashing through his mind. There is that the way she troubled her, the way she tortured her, the way he had troubles with her, had fomented troubles for Lajwanti, who was very slim, who was dangerously beautiful, young and all that, and even then Sundar Lal wasn't very much concerned about whatever Lajwanti was prior to the abduction. But after the abduction, remember, now there grows a soft corner for Sundar Lal, and Sundar Lal looks back in anger to find that he was not decent to her, was not decent to Lajwanti, and from Lajwanti she goes on to become Lajo. So this transition from Lajo, from Lajwanti to Lajo, has much to do with what finally Lajwanti becomes. So what happens that one day it is told to him by somebody that Lajwanti, he has seen Lajwanti. To which this Sundar Lal is quite shocked. For him, initially it comes to him as a shock that, did you see Lajwanti? Are you sure that she was the woman Lajwanti only? And the man reconfirmed that yes, he had seen Lajwanti. And she was Lajwanti only. And then all these thoughts came across Sundar Lal's mind, whether how she is going to be now, what she was, what she is, and then his mind is very preoccupied with the recovery of the woman lost, that is Lajwanti. And finally what happens, that there is a bit of ho-ha, and in the din of that ho-ha, you find that this Sundar Lal comes across Lajwanti. He does find Lajwanti there. And then, of course, there are some rebucks, there are some protests also, that no, none of the women will be taken back because they are already disgraced, and that will be a disgrace for the whole family to have an abducted woman brought back into the family and given and rehabilitated with the same zeal. So, but then Sundar Lal says, no, I will take Lajwanti back. Lajwanti is brought back home. And then that Lajwanti, who was so oppressed, who was used to be bitten by Sundar Lal very often, now finds Sundar Lal a very different man in terms of his treatment towards her, in terms of his responses to her, that no longer he is beating her, no longer that affection, that a normal reaction of Sundar Lal is there towards Lajwanti. And what does say Sundar Lal finds that, and she has grown a bit, she has grown up, she has put on a bit of weight, her cheeks are no longer that pinkish and all that. So there is a bit of transformation. It looks somewhat disoriented in the sense that very different from what she was prior to the abduction. But all these things he does not share with Lajwanti. There is no dialogue with Lajwanti, remember. There is no dialogue with Lajwanti. Lajwanti is brought back home, and there his treatment becomes very different in the sense that he begins to admire her in the sense, not in the physical sense of the term. So that physical intimacy disappears, and a spiritual dimension in the relationship creeps into it. Here she becomes almost, Sundarlal starts a kind of a deification, a kind of a reverence for Lajwanti, because now she is something who is almost like a goddess for him. So his treatment, his responses are very different, not the normal ones, and now he is on a higher pedestal of existence, glorified as almost a goddess, goddess-like stature that she gets upon her return back into the home. And this is something which irks Lajwanti. Lajwanti wanted to tell many things, share many stories that what you went in. Sundarlal never asked you what you were through, who were the people, except that there is one very subdued kind of response, or subdued kind of a reaction that the man was good. Sundarlal asked him whether he beat you also. She said no, he did not beat me. But then somewhere the psyche of Sundarlal was completely transformed in the sense that he began to view her with reverence. He began to view her with reverence, and this reverence largely was because was the redemption of Sundarlal for having oppressed her earlier. This was the redemption of Sundarlal. He was trying to redeem his own guilt. So on one level, it is the redemption of Sundarlal's guilt, while the response of Lajwanti is something very different, because she is not happy with her second life. Post-abduction, post-rehabilitation, she is not very happy. Why? Because he finds Sundarlal a very different man. He is not beating her, he is not being he is being very decent to her, which he never was. So that normal, that there is a kind of a quiet turbulence within Lajwanti. Quiet turbulence, a silent turbulence is within her. She is not very happy with her new life. She says that Sundarlal is no longer beating her. Sundarlal is no longer that furious element that he used to be. So there's somewhere that Sundarlal was also lost. That original Sundarlal was lost. That original Lajwanti for him was lost, and therefore Lajwanti becomes a goddess, and here Sundarlal becomes a very different character in the sense that he's trying to redeem himself. He's trying to salvage his soul by realizing that whatever he did, Lajwanti prior to her abduction was not good, was not fair, and therefore when on her return she becomes almost a kind of a goddess for him. She is revered, she is honored, and that honor which is completely disliked by Lajwanti. Remember, what is important, that Lajwanti is not happy about her newly acquired status of being a goddess in her own home. She wanted to be bitten by Sundarlal much the way she used to be bitten by him before her abduction, but nothing of the sort really comes about. So she is transformed into a different entity. She becomes very holy for Sundarlal, and no woman, remember, will ever accept that stature. And Lajwanti, being a woman, has her own demands. Being a woman has her own reactions. Being a woman has her own challenges to negotiate with her newly given status or identity. And here Rajinder Singh really troubles that probes that troubled psyche of Sundarlal, because he glorifies the character of Lajwanti, and from Lajwanti she becomes a Lajo. Lajo, that means obviously she is a very revered character. She is a very honorable, that becomes a very honorable identity for Sundarlal, and there is something which irks her, assails her, arraigns her, and she is not happy about it. And remember, what I see, what can be discerned here in this story is a woman's life. Remember, in the Indian society, obviously, that the rehabilitation or the reacceptability of a woman is still a very unrealistic possibility in the Indian context. So in the context of the Indian society, what is important here? Remember that a woman who is abducted stands discarded for the rest of her life. A woman who is discarded stands discarded for the rest of her life. There's not going to be honor for her. There's not going to be respect for her. There's not going to be grace for her. There's not going to be that normal acceptance of a woman who is abducted. So this is something, of course, that you call it a patriarchal neurosis, call it a patriarchal madness, call it a man's mindset, whatever names you give it to me. The fact of the matter is this, that the reacceptability of a woman in the Indian society, even today, is as much a problem as it was ever. So there is not much of a difference which has come about, which can be very apparent to us. So this Lajwanti also becomes a very important story, and possibly one of the two very important stories that I have gone through. One is, of course, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, and the second one is Lajwanti. About Lajwanti, it can be said that here Rajendra Singh Bedi also achieves a certain artistic distinction in the portraiture of Lajwanti and the way the whole story is told. So it's a narrative which is very scintillating. It is a narrative which informs you, or which reminds you of that artistic power which Rajendra Singh Bedi had. So that artistic power which Rajendra Singh Bedi had, and that artistic prowess which Rajendra Singh Bedi manifests in these narratives are non-parallel. They are incomparable in the sense that he had a very thorough understanding of what Indian society was. Because remember, he told stories early on in his childhood. He got his stories from his father. He got his stories from his granny also. And remember, Rajendra Singh Bedi has access to those parts of human experiences which are generally from the middle class or from the lower middle class, and he paints them very realistically. That's why I am to make a statement about Rajendra Singh Bedi, then I would say that Rajendra Singh Bedi is one of the most realistic dialects in Urdu fiction. Obviously, I am not going to what he did to the films. He had a cinematic career also. He had an stint as a screenwriter. He joined this Indian cinema at the later part of his life, was completely given to it. But whatever he wrote and whatever did he write, as a writer, stories like Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo, Lajwanti, then Brahman Ke Jute, Sirf Ek Cigarette, or for that Garam Coat, Garhan, Ek Chadar Maili Se, which is a novella, also give him a very different identity. And remember, he doesn't have that flight to the post hurriedness which Manchu had as a writer. So he is very, very, very quiet in his imagination. He is not he writes something which is very disturbing. Remember, he writes on issues which concern the society that we live today in, and even today it concerns the society of this time. It will concern the society of tomorrow also, because Rajendra Singh Bedi is transcendental. He has that powerlessness, he has that timeless, he has that power in his art, which makes him timeless. So the important part of Rajendra Singh Bedi is that he probes the human psychology. Though we generally ascribe it to Manchu for having gone deeper into the human psychology, but Rajendra Singh Bedi, by no stretch of imagination, falls short of expectations that you can have from him as a writer of short story. And possibly one of the most glittering names in the history of Urdu fiction is that. And today happens to be his birth anniversary. So my salutations to the man, my homage to the man, my tribute to the man, both as a writer, as an artist, and Rajendra Singh Bedi will survive the ravages of time. And obviously every art is to be re-evaluated from time to time. And this is possibly, I attempted a re-evaluation of stories in the context of the changing times. So Rajendra Singh Bedi will remain what he was even after 20 years or even after 50 years, because his art is something which is transcendental, is universal, and it's timeless. So it is the timelessness of the art which will make him relevant to all times to come. I think if you have any question, if anybody is there, have any question, you have any clarification to seek from me, I am always here to tell you, to respond to that. Remember, this is what yes. So you have any question as far as the two stories are concerned, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo or Lajwanti, whatever. If you think you have any doubt, if you think you have any clarification to seek from me, you are most welcome. Yes, please. Anybody? Hello. So I think not much to say. So can I close this? Can I close this one? The lecture here on Rajendra Singh Bedi. Yes, no lecture is complete. Remember, no lecture is complete. Maybe I have missed out on certain aspects which you can locate or which you can identify. Maybe I have not gone into the dimensions of Bedi's stories. Maybe I have a very parochial. I have taken a very parochial view of Bedi's stories. But then, all in all, I must say that Rajendra Singh Bedi's emergence or his re-emergence will always depend on the kind of interpretation that you have. And I gave you one interpretation of two stories, Apne Dukh Mujhe Dedo and Lajwanti. You may disagree, you can have your points of disagreement, you can have your points of dissent also, you may not agree. There some of the issues might be very disagreeable to you, but then these all issues will be there, and that is the beauty of literary responses that you can always have. So if I am closing, then I am really very thankful to the people who joined online. Thank you everybody for being with me this long, and if there is any problem that is still thing that I should have discussed which I did not discuss, then you are most welcome. You can post your queries, you can post your questions also later on whenever you think they are there. Thank you very much everybody.